At 5:43 in the morning, Captain Heinrich Lemke received the paper that would erase whatever remained of his soul. Clear the quarter. All Jews to transport. The signature at the bottom was familiar, a superior who always signed with a flourish, as if proud of the efficiency of death. But this time, one additional line followed in ink slightly darker, still wet, children included. He sat in his small office on the edge of the Warsaw Ghetto, the August air heavy with dust and smoke. Outside, a convoy of trucks idled, engines coughing in the cold. Men smoked, laughed, adjusted their belts. Someone was telling a joke about rationed cigarettes. It was an ordinary morning in an extraordinary hell. Lemke turned the paper over, as though the order might vanish if he didn't look at it. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of something nameless. He had carried out dozens of these actions. He had seen mothers torn from their children, men shot for stepping out of line. But children, alone, that was new. He heard the clock strike 6. The sound echoed through the concrete hallway like the ticking of a weapon being loaded. His adjutant, Feldwebel Kruger, entered briskly. "Captain, the men are ready. Do we proceed?" Lemke didn't answer. He looked out the small window. The sun was rising over the ghetto, a pale, colorless light revealing rooftops broken by shellfire, smoke rising like ghosts. Somewhere, a dog barked. Somewhere else, someone screamed. He remembered the academy in Munich, the smell of polish and new uniforms, the oath he had sworn to the Reich. To serve faithfully. He had believed in order, in discipline, in the illusion that obedience was the same as honor. But honor had long since rotted in this city of ash. Kruger cleared his throat. "Sir." Lemke finally spoke, his voice flat. "Tell them to wait." The sergeant hesitated. "Wait, sir." "Yes. Until I say otherwise." Kruger saluted and left, confused. Lemke sat alone again. On his desk lay the map of the quarter, block after block marked with red crosses, each symbol a family, a name, a story. He reached for his cigarette case, then stopped. The smell of smoke from outside already filled the air. He thought of his mother's letters from Hamburg. "When this is over, Heinrich, come home. Your niece wants to see your uniform." He had never answered her. How could he explain what that uniform meant here? A distant explosion shook the glass. Someone shouted orders in the yard. Lemke folded the paper and slipped it into his coat pocket. It felt hot, as if burning against his chest. Downstairs, the soldiers waited beside the trucks, rifles slung, cigarettes glowing in the dawn. "Sir, ready when you are," Kruger said again. Lemke looked at the faces, boys, really, 19 or 20, their boots too large, their eyes half empty. He thought, they have no idea what this is. He could say the word, execute, and the day would proceed as all the others had. Another train, another list checked, another village emptied. The system would move on, indifferent, perfect in its cruelty. But something inside him refused to move. The wind carried a smell, not smoke this time, but something else, faintly sweet, like wet bread from the bakery that used to stand at the corner before the ghetto wall went up. For a moment he saw the memory instead of the ruin, a woman at the counter, flour on her hands, humming softly. He had been there once, years ago, before the war. The spell broke with a voice shouting, "Captain." Kruger again, impatient. Lemke nodded slowly. "Tell them to stay where they are." He turned away from the window and opened the drawer of his desk. Inside lay his service pistol, polished, almost unused. He stared at it, then closed the drawer again. Instead, he reached for his field coat, his cap, and the paper still warm from his body heat. He stepped outside. The men straightened, expecting the order. He didn't give it. Instead, he said quietly, "You'll receive instructions shortly. Stand by." And then, without explanation, he walked past them, through the gate, toward the edge of the ghetto. The guards exchanged glances but didn't stop him. He was the officer, who were they to question? The narrow streets ahead were silent except for the sound of boots on cobblestones and the distant rattle of chains. Lemke passed a burned-out shop front, its window painted with a Star of David. Behind it, a faint movement, eyes watching from the shadows. Children, perhaps. He stopped. The paper in his pocket seemed to grow heavier. A whisper escaped his lips, he wasn't sure if he meant it as a prayer or a curse. Not this time. At 6:47 a.m., Captain Heinrich Lemke disappeared from his post. Later that day, the 17th Field Police Battalion would record a single line in its logbook. Unit B delayed in clearing Sector 12. Cause unknown. But those who were there remembered something different, the sight of their captain walking alone into the smoke, his face pale against the morning light. And though no one dared say it aloud, every man knew he was carrying the weight of disobedience heavier than any weapon. He had just defied the only order that mattered. And he was not coming back. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. The warehouse near the Warsaw East Station smelled of wet coal and fear. The kind of smell that never left your clothes. A single bulb swung above the entrance, throwing light across puddles of oil and boot prints. Captain Heinrich Lemke hesitated before entering. He had led men through fire, yet here his hand trembled as he touched the door. Inside, silence. Then, small shapes. 23 children. They sat in rows between empty barrels, their eyes huge and glassy, watching him as if he were death itself. The oldest could not have been more than 13. The youngest, a baby wrapped in a scarf, whimpered softly. Someone had tried to hush it with a rag soaked in sugar water. A Polish woman stood near the wall, flowers still on her apron. Her face said everything: exhaustion, terror, disbelief. She looked at the German uniform, then at his eyes, and froze. "You're not supposed to be here," she whispered in broken German. "I know," Lemke said. A boy stepped forward. Pale, sharp-faced, the kind of child who should have been in school, not hiding from soldiers. "Her officer," he said carefully. "Are we going to die?" The words hit harder than a bullet. Lemke had heard men scream, had seen bodies crumble under artillery. But no sound in war ever pierced him like that small, flat voice. "Not if I can help it," he replied, his throat dry. He turned to the woman. "Water. Bread. Now." She moved quickly, like a ghost suddenly given purpose. The children drank in turns, polite even in terror. One girl shared her crust with another, breaking it exactly in half, no crumbs wasted. Outside, boots scraped the cobblestones. Voices. Orders shouted. The city was waking into another day of murder. Lemke knew he had minutes. Maybe less. He took off his leather gloves, reached into his tunic, and pulled out his identification papers. When Feldwebel Kruger appeared in the doorway, rain dripping from his cap, Lemke didn't hesitate. He pressed the wallet into his sergeant's hands. "If anyone asks, tell them I died on duty. An accident during transport." Kruger blinked. "Herr Hauptmann, what are you saying?" "I'm saying this ends for me, here." Lemke's voice was calm, like reciting procedure. "Delay the action. Tell them there's confusion with the manifests. An inspection. Anything." The sergeant looked at him, one heartbeat, two, then nodded slowly. "Understood." He didn't salute. Just turned and walked out, shoulders stiff with what he wasn't saying. The children watched. Lemke crouched, bringing himself to their height. "Listen to me," he said quietly. "We're leaving. You will walk when I say walk. No talking. No crying. No matter what you hear. Understand?" The boy nodded. The others followed, small heads bobbing in the dim light. The woman handed Lemke a key tied to a string. "Back door," she whispered. "Through the coal chute, then the alley with the cats." There's a church on Swiatokrzyska. The priest helps people. He met her eyes. You shouldn't do this. She gave a sad smile. You shouldn't either. They moved fast. The coal chute led into a narrow passage, the air thick with soot. The children crawled one by one, their breath loud in the darkness. Lemke followed last, dragging the barrel back over the opening. Above them, the warehouse door slammed open. Shouts. The search had begun. They reached the yard, mud, broken crates, a single flickering lamp. Cats scattered as they passed. Beyond the fence, an alley bent sharply left. Lemke motioned with his hand. Now. They slipped through the gap, a line of shadows holding each other's coats. The baby whimpered. Lemke froze. A patrol rounded the corner, 2 soldiers, cigarettes glowing like fireflies. "Wr ist da," one called. Lemke straightened, stepping into the light. "Transport detail," he barked in perfect authority. "Children for Labor Division, orders from command." The soldiers looked at him, uncertain. One squinted at the children. "At night? Do you want them freezing here until morning?" Lemke snapped. "If the Oberst asks why the shipment's late, you can explain it yourself." The men hesitated. One finally waved. "Go. Quickly." "Appreciated," Lemke said, tipping his cap. He herded the group around the bend, heart pounding in his ears. When they were clear, he exhaled for the first time. Rain began again, thin and cold. They walked for nearly an hour through the ruins, past broken windows, walls riddled with bullet holes, puddles reflecting flames in the distance. The smallest stumbled. Lemke carried him on his back. They reached a half-collapsed bakery, the sign still faintly visible beneath soot. He remembered it, years ago, before the walls went up. The smell of bread, laughter. Now only ashes. "Rest," he whispered. The children huddled together, shivering. He looked north. Somewhere beyond those streets, beyond the canal, there was talk of a safe house, Zagoda, the network that smuggled children out. Maybe they were still alive. Maybe not. But it was the only direction left. The Polish woman would later write a letter, found decades after the war. "I saw a German officer carrying a child and crying. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a father." By dawn, the patrols were everywhere. Whistles echoed across the district. Kruger's voice could be heard shouting in the yard, pretending anger, buying time. Lemke gathered the children again. "Stay close," he said. "No matter what happens." The boy with the split lip looked up at him. "Will you come with us?" Lemke hesitated, then nodded. "As far as I can." They disappeared into the ruins, 1 man, 23 children, and a dawn that would never forget them. The night rain in Warsaw fell like smoke, swallowing every sound except the faint splash of boots and the soft breath of children. Captain Heinrich Lemke led the way, his pistol drawn but lowered. Behind him moved 23 small figures, quiet, ghost-like. The city was a maze of shadows. Walls leaned inward as if trying to listen. Somewhere, a German loudspeaker echoed through the ruins, "Curfew in effect. Any civilians found outside will be shot." Lemke didn't flinch. He counted every step, 12 between corners, 8 across the alley, before stopping to listen. His uniform, once pressed and proud, was dark with mud. Each gust of wind carried ashes from the burning ghetto, and he wondered if the world itself was turning to dust. They crossed a broken courtyard, past a toppled statue and a fountain full of rainwater. One girl slipped, he caught her wrist before she fell. "Careful," he whispered. The children nodded but said nothing. Silence had become their only language. At the end of the street, a wall had collapsed. On one stone, faint chalk marks glimmered in the wet, a circle with a slash. Zagoda. The underground. Lemke felt his chest tighten. "This way," he said, crouching low. They crawled through the rubble and into the basement of a shattered house. It smelled of kerosene and potatoes. A single candle burned on a crate. From the dark, a man stepped forward, thin, hollow-eyed, a Red Cross armband tied over his sleeve. "You're German," the man said flatly. "Not tonight," Lemke answered. The man looked past him to the children. "You brought them here. Are you insane? If they find you, they will find us all," Lemke cut in. "Help me move them first. Then talk." Something in his tone made the man obey. They pulled aside wooden boxes, revealing a hole in the floor. "It leads to another cellar," the man said. "We use it when there's a raid." The children went down one by one. The youngest, a baby wrapped in a scarf, whimpered softly. Lemke pressed a finger to his lips. "Shoo," he murmured, brushing a hand over the tiny head. Then came the sound that froze everyone, dogs, barking somewhere close. Flashlights slashed across the street above. "Rouse! Search the buildings." The man blew out the candle. Darkness swallowed the room. Dust drifted from the ceiling as boots stomped overhead. "There's a tunnel," the man whispered. "Under the street. It goes to the river." "How far?" 200 meters. "Then we use it." Lemke turned to the children. "Crawl. Follow the person in front of you. No sound." He went first, dropping into the tunnel, a narrow throat of brick and mud. The air was damp and heavy. Behind him, hands scraped the ground, knees thudded softly. The smell of earth filled his mouth. "Keep moving," he whispered. "Almost there." Halfway through, someone gasped. Lemke looked back. "Count," he whispered. 22. The boy with the split lip was missing. Lemke's stomach dropped. "Keep going," he said to the man behind him. "Take them to the river. Don't stop." He turned and crawled back into the darkness. The sound of barking grew louder, the tunnel walls shook with distant voices. At the cellar entrance, he saw light, 2 soldiers, rifles ready, dogs sniffing. The missing boy was crouched in the corner, frozen with fear. Lemke stepped from the shadows. He fired once, not at them, but into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. The soldiers shouted, blinded by dust. Lemke grabbed the boy, dragged him into the tunnel, and ran on his hands and knees. A bullet cracked the wall behind him, spraying grit into his face. "Go," he hissed. The boy crawled ahead, sobbing quietly. The tunnel narrowed, but then, air. Cold, wet, alive. They burst out through a grate onto the riverbank. Mist rolled low over the water. The others were waiting, silhouettes in the fog. Lemke lifted the boy out, then followed. The dawn was bleeding into the sky, pale, uncertain. Far behind, sirens wailed. He could already imagine the report, Captain Lemke missing. Suspected desertion. The boy clung to his sleeve. "You came back," he whispered. Lemke smiled faintly, rain streaking his face. "Ich come Zurich," he said, "I came back." He looked toward the fog. "Go north," he told the group. "Follow the river until you see the bridge. Someone will find you." They hesitated. He nodded. "Now." The children moved, small shapes swallowed by mist. Lemke watched until they were gone. Then he turned toward the barking and the light returning through the tunnel. He straightened his coat, wiped the mud from his pistol, and walked back into the dark. The office smelled of smoke and wet paper. Morning light slipped through wooden shutters, striping the desk where an empty holster lay beside a coiled dog tag. The chair behind it was neatly pushed in, as if the man who sat there had only stepped out for a minute. At 7:10, the clerk wrote the first note of the day. Captain H. Lemke, absent from roll call. Cause unknown. Within minutes, the hall filled with boots and whispers. Where is he? Who signed for the transport? Who has the sector map? The senior lieutenant came in, cigarette in mouth, uniform half-buttoned. He froze at the sight of the empty holster. He left his weapon. No one answered. Finally someone muttered, he took the transport list. Another added, the list was for children. Silence fell, the kind that feels like a wound. Then came the noise of drawers slamming, papers rustling, phones ringing. Orders snapped through the air, find him. Now. By 7:40, a message had gone out to every unit. Captain Heinrich Lemke missing with transport documents. Suspected desertion. Patrols spread through the district. Carts were stopped, cellars searched, women questioned. Near the Vistula, a sentry reported seeing a man in a dark coat leading a group toward the river. The note was stamped twice and filed away as unconfirmed. Inside headquarters, an officer from Internal Affairs opened a new folder. On the cover, Lemke, Heinrich, Conduct Inquiry. In the desk drawer, he found a child's photograph, a letter from Hamburg, and a half-empty pack of cigarettes. He wrote, personal effects retained. Then paused, as if something unseen was missing. By noon, rumors ran faster than reports. He took the children. The word slid through corridors, whispered at coffee cups, muttered behind doors. Some laughed, uneasy. Others spat. One voice, low, almost afraid, said, maybe he remembered he was human. No one wrote that down. At 1300 hours, Gefreiter Schulz asked to make a clarification call. He closed the door, dialed, and gave his name to a voice on the other end, Gestapo headquarters on Succa Avenue. Captain Lemke has disappeared, he said. Possibly with Jewish children. I thought you should know. His voice trembled between duty and relief. An hour later, men in black coats arrived. They didn't speak much. They took the files, maps, and transport lists. They questioned everyone, louder each time. The senior lieutenant answered in circles, sweating through his collar. By 1600 hours, the official report was typed. Captain Lemke failed to execute lawful orders and is suspected of assisting Jewish civilians in escape. Search to continue. Evening brought no clarity. Patrols returned empty-handed. Witnesses contradicted each other, a figure near the river, a coat, a shadow. No one was sure. But by then, the conclusion had already been written. At dawn on August 8, a single-page document arrived by courier. Subject, Lieutenant Heinrich Lemke. Charge, treason and aiding enemies of the Reich. Sentence, execution by firearm, 5:30 hours, per standing order. Case closed. No witnesses were named. No body was recorded. The report was stamped erledigt, done. The paper passed from hand to hand in silence. The clerk added one last line to the morning log, absence resolved. The empty holster was returned to storage. The chair stayed neatly tucked under the desk. The office, once filled with noise, fell quiet again. Schulz bragged in the yard later, saying he had protected the honor of the unit. The others nodded, eager to forget. Forgetting was easier than asking what kind of honor needed protection from a man who carried children instead of a gun. That night, the shutters rattled in the wind. Somewhere far off, a train groaned on its tracks. A clerk working late swore he heard footsteps in the hall, slow, deliberate, but when he looked, no one was there. The official file said executed by law. But even the most obedient minds couldn't silence the other question that lingered like smoke in the room. By law? By conscience? They believed it was over. The file was stamped, the desk cleared, the name erased from rosters. Yet far beyond the city, as darkness fell across the river, 23 children climbed from a borrowed boat onto muddy ground. They were barefoot, shivering, and alive. And though no one in that office would ever know it, the man they condemned as a traitor had already won his only battle. Paris, autumn 1945. The city was still gray from the war, buildings patched, windows fogged with dust, the Seine moving slow as if tired of carrying reflection. In a crowded room of the Red Cross headquarters, typewriters clattered without pause. People waited in lines that never seemed to move, each holding a photograph or a name scribbled on paper. On the far wall hung a banner, Réunion de Familles Déplacées. Among the hundreds sat a young woman in a plain black dress. Her hair was pinned neatly, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. In her hands, a small photograph of a man in uniform. Beneath it, the words, Heinrich Lemke, 17. Feldpolizei. A volunteer approached her. "Madam, do you seek a relative?" She hesitated, as if the question required courage. "My husband," she said softly. "He was declared dead. August 1942. But no one ever found anything." The volunteer nodded politely, marking something on a form. Around them, the noise of typewriters and shuffling feet filled the air like rain. Then, from the doorway, a small voice. "Madame Lemke?" The woman turned. A girl stood there, no more than 10, thin as a whisper, her coat 2 sizes too large. She held a paper tag tied around her wrist, Orphan Transport, Zygota/Warsaw, 1942. "Who are you?" the woman asked. "My name is Sarah," the girl said. He said you would come one day." The woman stared, unable to speak. "Who?" "Captain Lemke," the girl answered simply. "He told us to remember his name. He said, if you survive, find my wife. Tell her I came back." Silence fell over the room. Even the typewriters seemed to pause. Sarah stepped closer, holding out a folded piece of paper. The woman took it with shaking hands. It was yellowed, the ink blurred but still legible, German handwriting, hurried and slanted. "I cannot stop this war, but I can stop one morning of it. If there is any world left, tell them I did not lose my soul. H.L." The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Around them, people glanced, sensing a story that had survived its own erasure. The volunteer gently guided them to a small office at the back, away from the noise. Inside, a man from the Polish underground sat behind a desk. His badge read, Zygota, Coordination Committee. He listened quietly as the woman explained. When she finished, he nodded. "Yes," he said slowly. "I know the name. We received 23 children from a German officer that night, August 7, 1942. It was madness, but it happened. He refused to leave until the last one crossed the river." He opened a folder filled with old reports. On one page, faded pencil notes read, "Group of children delivered by Wehrmacht officer. No identification. Said, for them, not for me." The woman pressed the paper to her chest. "So it's true," she whispered. The man sighed. He never reached the safe zone. But the children did. Every one of them. He looked at Sarah. This one was the youngest. She refused to leave without his promise. The girl nodded. "He told me not to be afraid. He said the night doesn't last forever." The woman knelt in front of her. "You remember his face?" "Yes," Sarah said. "He looked like someone who didn't belong in that uniform." The room stayed silent. Outside, the church bells of Saint-Germain rang faintly, a sound the city hadn't heard during the occupation. Later, as dusk fell over Paris, the woman stepped outside with Sarah. The air smelled of rain and coal smoke. On the steps, people read lists pinned to the walls, missing, found, dead. The woman unfolded her husband's note again. The ink had faded, but one line shone clear in the dim light, "I cannot change the war, but I can change this day." Sarah slipped her hand into hers. "Madame Lemke," she said, "he did." They stood together, two survivors bound by a man the world had already forgotten. Behind them, the doors of the Red Cross Hall swung open and shut, carrying with them fragments of other names, other miracles. That night, the woman wrote a letter to the German consulate. My husband was executed for treason in 1942. But the children he saved are alive. I ask only that his name not be erased again. She folded it carefully, sealing it with trembling fingers. The official answer, when it arrived months later, was predictable: no record of Captain Lemke exists in military archives. But the world has its own archives, the kind kept in memories, in the faint handwriting of a child's letter, in the tremor of a widow's hand. Years would pass before anyone reopened the question of who he was. For now, there was only silence, but it was the kind of silence that grows, that waits. The name Lemke had been struck from every roster, every report, every military file. But in 1982, it would appear again, carved into stone, on a wall far from Warsaw. Jerusalem, 1985. The morning light came off the limestone like water. On the hill, among olive trees that stirred in a dry wind, a path led past plaques and small stones set on ledges by quiet hands. The garden of the righteous was not loud, it spoke in carved letters, in dates, in the small, stubborn ritual of remembering. A group of older people moved slowly together, their steps careful on the gravel. At the center walked a woman with silver hair and a dark dress that didn't quite fit her shoulders. She had crossed 2 oceans to be here. On the flight she had kept a paper envelope in her lap the whole time, as if turbulence could tear open the past. Her name was Sarah. In Paris she had been 10. Now she carried a pebble from the Seine wrapped in tissue and a letter with a faded crease. The guide stopped at a low wall just off the path. "New names," he said softly. There were many, arranged by country, each line a life compressed to metal and stone. Sarah took a breath and scanned the German list with the careful disbelief of someone searching for a face in a crowd. She knew true names here, people the world finally learned to honor. She did not expect to find the one she carried. And yet, there it was, steadier than ink. Heinrich Lemke, Germany. The letters seemed impossible, the way rain sometimes begins when the sky is still blue. Sarah touched the name with 2 fingers as if it might smear. It didn't. The metal was warm in the sun. Around her, the others in the group shifted, whispering. A man in a knitted cap asked the guide in Hebrew, who was he? The guide glanced at his notes. A composite file, he said. Multiple testimonies converging. A Wehrmacht officer who refused an action in Warsaw and escorted children to a Zagota-safe route in August 1942. Executed the next day, according to Gestapo records. Case reopened in the 1980s when new documents surfaced, a letter from his widow, Red Cross lists from Paris, and statements from 2 surviving children, one named Sarah. He looked up. Sometimes the archive is slower than the heart. Sarah smiled without showing teeth. It always is, she said. She placed the stone from the Seine above the name, the sound of it small and decisive. Then she unfolded the letter she had carried for 40 years, the one with hurried German handwriting that had once lived inside a child's coat. "I cannot stop this war, but I can stop one morning of it. If there is any world left, tell them I did not lose my soul." A breeze lifted the page. Olive leaves rattled like faint applause. Sarah read aloud in English for those who didn't know the other tongue. As she spoke, faces changed, anger dissolving into something older, grief settling into gratitude. A man wiped his glasses. A woman pressed her mouth hard with her knuckles. Nearby, a curator from the archives waited respectfully. When Sarah finished, he stepped closer with a folder. "We debated the name," he admitted. "We are careful. We did not want legend. We wanted evidence. Then we found the Zagota note, pencil on lined paper, group of children delivered by Wehrmacht officer. Said, for them, not for me. We found the battalion log with a single line, absence resolved, and a copied order of execution with no body, no witnesses. A hole where a man should be." He gestured to the wall. "Sometimes holes are the shape of truth." Sarah nodded. "I remember his eyes," she said, more to the stone than to the curator. "He didn't shout. He didn't even promise much. He only said, quiet. I'm with you. And then he went back. The curator's mouth tightened at the edges. There were not many like him, he said. But there were a few. Enough to make a list. Not enough to fill the silence. They stood that way for a long time. Tourists passed, low-voiced, the air carrying the smell of dust and rosemary, the metallic click of camera shutters that would try, imperfectly, to hold light. From the valley below came the thin sound of a bus grinding its gears. Life went on as it always had, forward and indifferent, and yet here, for a moment, it paused. Sarah took a second stone from her pocket, smaller than the first. On it she had written 2 letters in pencil, H.L. She placed it gently next to the name. For the day you gave us, she whispered. For the night you took back. Behind her, one of the men who had walked in with the group asked, "Do you forgive him for wearing that uniform?" Sarah didn't turn. "He forgave himself by the way he left it," she said. "The rest is not mine to judge." The guide glanced at his watch and murmured that the group should move on. People began to drift away along the path, reading other names, adding other stones. Sarah remained a moment longer. She pressed her palm flat against the plaque as if to pass warmth into it, or receive some back. The metal did not answer. It didn't need to. It had already said the only thing it could, the only thing that mattered: this existed. On the way out, under a pergola of wisteria, a small display case held copies of documents, a Zagota route sketch in pencil, the Paris Red Cross ledger entry, a blurred photograph of children at a riverside, the smallest wrapped in a scarf. At the bottom, a line the curator had typed on heavy paper: "Righteousness is not a theory. It is a choice made at a particular hour." Sarah paused and, almost absently, straightened the edge of the paper with a fingertip. Then she looked once more toward the wall. Olive leaves glittered. The city below flashed with buses and laundry and sunlit water tanks. It was, undeniably, a world. She walked on with the others, footsteps soft on the stone. Sometimes, to remain human, you must forget which army you belong to. He did not win a war. He won back his humanity, and that, at last, was enough.